For the examples we're about to look at, we'll be using the zero product property. So let's quickly review that. The zero product property says that if we have a product, that is, things that are multiplied together, and the result is 0, then we know that at least one of those factors that are being multiplied have to be a 0. We can use the zero product property to solve equations that are factorable, like this one. If we factor the left side of the equation, we have two factors which, when multiplied together, equal 0. At least one of those two factors has to equal 0, and that leads us to our solution of either x equals 5 or x equals -3. That example used the zero product property to solve a quadratic equation, but we can also use the zero product property to solve higher order equations as long as they're factorable. The method of factoring we're going to be looking at to solve this equation is called factoring by grouping. Because we're going to use the zero product property, we still want to have all the terms on one side of that equal sign and a 0 on the other side. So we'll subtract the 4x from both sides and also subtract the 12 from both sides. To factor by grouping, we'll group the first two terms together and the last two terms together, and then look for a common factor within each group. The first group has a common factor of x squared, and the second group has a common factor of -4. Now we have two terms. The first one is x squared times x plus 3, and the second term is -4 times x plus 3. There's a common factor of x plus 3 between those two terms, so we'll factor out the common factor and multiply that times the leftover factors in the two terms. We've done the factoring by grouping, but we can factor a little more if we notice that the x squared minus 4 is the difference of two squares, and it can be factored into x minus 2 times x plus 2. Now we've got three factors that multiply together to give us 0, so we know that at least one of those three factors has to equal 0. And that leads us to three equations that we can solve for x, giving us our solution. Either x is -3, or x is +2, or x is -2. Let's look at one more example. We'll solve 3x cubed minus 15 equals 3x minus 15x squared. If we're going to use a zero product property, we need to have everything on one side of that equal sign, and we'll make sure that we put all the terms in descending order of exponents. So we know that 3x cubed plus 15x squared minus 3x minus 15 equals 0. We'll group the first two terms together and the last two terms together to see if factoring by grouping will work. In the first two terms, we have a common factor of 3x squared. And in the second two terms, we have a common factor of -3. Now we've got two terms, each with two factors. The first term is 3x squared times x plus 5, and the second term is -3 times x plus 5. The common factor between those two terms is x plus 5, so we'll factor it out and multiply it times the leftover factors in the terms, which is 3x squared minus 3. 3x squared minus 3 can still be factored a little more. There's a common factor of 3 in 3x squared minus 3, so we can rewrite it as 3 times x squared minus 1. And the x squared minus 1 is the difference of two squares, which we can write as x plus 1 times x minus 1. Now we've got four factors that are multiplied together to give us 0, so at least one of those factors has to be a 0. The x plus 5 could be a 0. The next factor is 3, and it can't be 0, it's 3. The third factor is x plus 1, it could be a 0. And then the fourth factor is x minus 1, it could be a 0. Finally, we'll solve each of those equations to get our solution. Either x is -5, or x is -1, or x is +1.